Academy Award-winning actor Cuba Gooding Jr. has officially broken his silence after being named in one of Sean Diddy Combs' sexual assault lawsuits. We are going to break down the history of his connection to the case and analyze his new statements. Welcome to our channel, Trendy Talks with thrilling and exciting news. Cuba Gooding Jr. is a name we haven't spoken about in a minute. For anybody following Sean Diddy Combs' legal saga with us here on Sidebar, you're going to know his connection to all this. But what you might have missed is the fact that Cuba Gooding Jr. has just spoken out about this, seemingly for the first time, broken his silence. But I'm going to give you a little bit more context here to understand what we're talking about. So, Sean Combs, the rapper, music mogul, purported billionaire, he was hit with a number of different sexual assault and misconduct lawsuits the past several months. His home in LA and Miami were raided by federal agents pursuant to a reported ongoing sex trafficking investigation. Although, to be clear, aside from an associate of Combs who was arrested on drug charges on the day of the raids, neither Combs nor his family nor anybody in his inner circle have been arrested or criminally charged in connection with this probe. Now, one of the lawsuits that Combs is facing is from his former music producer Rodney Little Rod Jones. Jones sues Combs for sexual assault, harassment, sex trafficking. Basically, he claims that Combs forced him to solicit sex workers and perform sex acts for the pleasure of Combs, and that Combs himself would touch and grope his private areas without his consent. Jones says that he was also forced to be present when Combs walked around naked and showed. There were also allegations of drug use, illegal firearms possession, shootings, violence. But in this lawsuit, Jones also claims that Combs was trying to groom him for homosexual sex. And in the lawsuit, Jones recalls an incident on Combs' yacht with actor Cuba Gooding Jr. So, according to the complaint, it reads that Mr. Combs introduced Mr. Jones to Cuba Gooding Jr. while they were on Mr. Combs' rented yacht back in January of 2023 in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, according to Mr. Jones, during the introduction, Mr. Combs suggested that Cuba get to know Mr. Jones better. He then left them alone in a makeshift studio on the yacht. Actually, in his complaint, Jones embeds a picture of the actor and Jones together, talking in what appears to be that studio on the yacht. The complaint goes on, it reads, as evidenced by a video of which screenshots are embedded below, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones' legs, his upper inner thighs near his groin, the small of his back near his buttocks, and his shoulders. According to Mr. Jones, he was extremely uncomfortable and proceeded to lean away from Mr. Gooding Jr. He rejected his advances, and Mr. Gooding Jr. did not stop until Mr. Jones forcibly pushed him away. The following is a screenshot of the encounter with Cuba Gooding Jr. And that screenshot, again, another one that's embedded, appears to show the actor sitting next to Jones with his arm around him, around his shoulder, close together. They have headphones on, seemingly listening to music. Jones appears to be smiling, and Cuba Gooding Jr. has his face close to Jones. And now, in a footnote, Jones writes, Mr. Gooding Jr. has a storied history of sexually assaulting and forcibly touching individuals against their will. And then a link to a USA Today article. Quick note about that, the actor has faced sexual misconduct allegations in the past. In fact, he pled guilty in connection with forcibly kissing a nightclub worker back in 2018, actually pled guilty to that misdemeanor charge, but he was permitted to withdraw that plea. Pled guilty to a non-criminal harassment violation because he had completed 6 months of alcohol and behavior counseling. So no jail time, nothing goes on his criminal record. And last year, he settled a reported $6 million civil lawsuit that accused him of raping a woman in his hotel room in New York. Now, Jones actually listed Cuba Gooding Jr. as a defendant in this lawsuit. And by the way, listen to this rather pointed description of him, by the way. It reads, Defending Cuba Gooding Jr. was a relevant actor who has fallen from grace due to several sexual assault lawsuits and a recent guilty plea for sexual assault. Yeah, side note about that. I've spoken about this before, that there is this language in the Jones lawsuit and another one I'll get to in a minute that kinda takes these shots, these personal shots at the defendants. Relevant actor, fallen from grace. Yes, he's accused of bad stuff, but that doesn't really seem to apply to the legal accusations at hand. Says that the actor forcibly touched him, attempted or threatened to touch his private areas, that it was malicious, it was willful, that he acted with conscious disregard for his rights. Did a deep dive on it. Well, Cuba Gooding Jr. is mentioned in that complaint in a section that talks about how guests came on board the yacht, including the actor. So the plaintiff, Grace Omari, claims that Cuba Gooding Jr. was extremely unpleasant to serve. He sat at the bar, made derogatory comments to her. He was visibly intoxicated, and she was in the room and witnessed him inappropriately touching producer Rodney Jones, who at the time was working on the Love album. So that's an important note. Omari and Rodney Jones, by the way, are married. They are together. They have filed these lawsuits together. So we've heard Cuba Gooding Jr.'s name mentioned in that case, in that context, and we've heard it mentioned in this new context with Rodney Jones. Now, why is this significant? Well, because now we have a statement from Cuba Gooding Jr. for the first time. This is a big deal. We haven't heard anything from him, I think, about anything in the past couple of years maybe. And I'm sure he's gotten a lot of bad press, a lot of negative attention. Well, this is his opportunity to say something. So he spoke to Page 6, a publication, and he said, "I am completely unaware of any video and can only say that I was in attendance at a social gathering a year ago, and I can't remember specific people's names, but I always treat others with respect and will continue to do so." Okay, let's break this down for a minute. He says he's completely unaware of any video. That's an interesting statement. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That doesn't mean he wasn't there. That doesn't mean he didn't do anything. That just means he's unaware of it. Interesting use of language there. And then he says, "I can only say that I was in attendance at a social gathering a year ago." Interesting, because he doesn't deny that he was there. He's just saying, "I was at a social gathering." Doesn't mean I did anything wrong. But listen to what he says next. He says, "I can't remember specific people's names." Now, if you were innocent of these accusations, wouldn't you want to do everything in your power to clear your name, to distance yourself from this? And if you couldn't remember specific people's names, I remember exactly who was there, what we did, what we talked about, and that this did not happen. That's not what he's saying. He's just saying, "I don't remember people's names." And then he says, "But I always treat others with respect and will continue to do so." I mean, that's a nice sentiment, but again, that doesn't really say anything about these allegations. And remember, he does have a history of being accused of inappropriate behavior, and he has had to face the consequences of that before. Interesting statement. Doesn't really deny anything, doesn't provide an alibi, doesn't provide an explanation. And, you know, it is true. Innocent until proven guilty. He hasn't been convicted of anything in connection with this, but it's also interesting to note how quickly he's distancing himself from all this. Doesn't want to be associated with it. I'm sure that his team is telling him, "Hey, this isn't good for your reputation. Let's put out a statement and just try to get out ahead of this." Okay, so that's the update with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Sean Combs. We will keep you posted on any updates. I'm sure there will be many, but until then, thanks for watching. Stay connected to our channel for next updates. Also, like, share, and subscribe my channel.